Hi, everybody. JB here again. This is episode 7 of Did You Ever Wonder? Question is, who are Charles Morrow Wilson and George Ballard? You might go, well, I don't care. But anyway, these are two writers from the past I wanted to talk about. Notice this article I've got here on the cover slide, Fayetteville, Mecca for Writers, written by a lady in the Arkansas Democrat, Sunday, November 20th, 1921. Finding that was difficult because all I had was this article, no date and no newspaper, but I found it. Anyway, it talks mostly about Charles J. Finger, who's kind of the source of this idea of Fayetteville being a Mecca for writers. So during the 1920s to the 1940s, we had a lot of writers. Fayetteville has always had writers here, but during the 20s and 40s, we had a lot of writers. And I want to talk about Charles Morrow Wilson and George Ballard today. But before I start on those guys, I want to just have you a little array of some of the writers. Probably the first one was A.W. Arrington, writing as Charles Summerfield. He wrote about the events of the 1839-40 range. William Cushenberry, a newspaper man, artist, the guy that had drew pictures of the Arkansas College and the Fayetteville Female Seminary that you've seen in other ones. There's Bud and Will Lighton, talked about them and the one about their family. And there's Mr. Finger himself, Charles J. Finger. I'll just say it here so I don't forget it. Finger Park and Finger Road out in Southwest Fayetteville are named for him. Murray Sheehan, he was one of the people influenced by Finger. He was a professor at the University of Arkansas and a writer. I'll talk about him another time. Sheehan rode a horse to work every day at the University of Arkansas. Unusual guy. And then there's Mrs. Marinoni, Rosa Marinoni, absolutely prolific poet. And she was the poet laureate of the state of Arkansas from 1953 till her death in 1970. So I want to start with Charles Morrow Wilson. He was the grandson of A.M. Wilson, one of the settlers of Fayetteville. This is the source for Wilson Park, for Wilson Avenue, for Wilson Street, everything around Wilson Park or City Park. Charles Morrow Wilson is one of the guys I refer to as from our generation of distinction. People born in the first decade of the 1900s, including J.W. Fulbright, who actually came here to Fayetteville when he was 1 year old, so I count him, and Edward Durrell Stone, who were internationally famous people. And Charles Morrow and Wilson knew them and grew up with them. Wilson wrote about 46 books, if you can believe it. Most of them are nonfiction, but he also wrote fiction as well. And he also, during the course of his time, he worked for companies like Firestone and United Fruit. And if you want to look up United Fruit, 1954, Guatemala, be my guest. This is a picture of Charles Morrow and his family. I think this is at their home on Woolsey Street, just above City Park, Wilson Park. That's Charles Morrow on the left. His half-sister Kate next to him. That's his dad, Joseph Dixon Wilson. Sound familiar, Joseph Dixon? A.M. Wilson was in business with Joseph Dixon. That's his half-brother Carl in the back. And the lady on the right is Mattie Morrow Wilson, for whom our city park is named. And that will be my next episode if all things go well. This book is a novel of his, Charles Morrow Wilson, Acres of Sky. It was it's kind of a homespun kind of, hillbilly Arkansas type book. But the reason I highlighted it is because in 1951, when the Fine Arts Building was dedicated to the University of Arkansas, it was designed by Edward Durrell Stone, the world famous architect. And Charles Morrow Wilson and a couple of his friends from New York created a play based on his book, Acres of Sky, and they put that on the U of A as part of all the celebration of the new building. One thing I should probably mention is that I almost forgot. Charles Morrow Wilson might be one of the last generation of writers who were able to make a living from writing for magazines and journals. He did that his whole life. It was an amazing thing. My next writer is George Ballard. You can see his dates there, 1882 to 1851. He was born out in the Centennial, Arkansas area, moved to Fayetteville in 1902, married a lady named Rosetta Dart, and they lived in a little house on East Mountain right behind the county jail. George Ballard did as you can imagine, in a segregated society in which he was growing or living in. He worked as a mechanic, a jail janitor, anything he could do, anything he could make a living. Well, he became well known when he wrote a poem about the death of Woodrow Wilson. It was in the paper and it got picked up in papers all around the country, and it made him really well known. So then, 4 years later, at the time of our centennial, Ballard had a book of poetry published called, very cleverly, I think, Ozark Ballads. I love that. And it was published by the Democrat publishing company here in town, and edited and helped by Leslie Stringfellow Reed, who was the editor of the Fayetteville Daily Democrat. Anyway, I thought that's really cool. And I have here, at the Centennial, that same year, 1928, we're only 8 years away from the bicentennial, you can imagine. He wrote a poem called Centennial, and I'm going to read just these 4 verses out of it for you, and make a little comment at the end. If you want, and looking back to see how time has flown, just look around in Fayetteville and see how she has grown. Our streets are paved with concrete, our electric lights aglow. Our homes were lit with candlelight 100 years ago. And the last 2 verses go, a dozen generations, like the flower and the weed, have passed into the great beyond that others might succeed. We have the same old babbling brooks, the same old rivers flow, but Fayetteville was not the same 100 years ago. And I'm sure hoping that at the bicentennial they will reprise this poem of George Ballard's and write for it. Let me read it for the centennial at 8 years, when it's 2028, 200 years of Fayetteville. Anyway, that's my 2 writers. There's many, many more. I'm going to hopefully sometime have another thing about writers. I kind of want to do a thing about stories and books that are about Fayetteville itself. So we'll see how these goes. That's all for today. I want to thank you once again for all the views that these are getting, and I hope you're enjoying them. One of the problems I'm having here with this, with Zoom, is when I get ready to end, it won't end. It won't bring up the little thing that allows me to stop the recording. And I don't know why that's happening, but I'm just going to have to click it off and live with that. So I'm going to stop the share. You'll have to put up with me for a second. So anyway, there I am. Thank you very much for staying with me. I appreciate it. Be safe and healthy. See you next time. Bye-bye.